Now that Donald Trump is president again, there are going to be some big changes coming for both legal immigrants and illegal immigrants in the United States. Changes that will make it much harder to get legal status, a green card, or even U.S. citizenship. How do I know? Well, I have been an immigration attorney for nearly 15 years, and I have seen the worst of it all through the last Trump administration. And based on what has been happening, it sounds like this second term will be much tougher than the first. That's why I have taken every single video I have made about Trump and put it together in one place to help you get ready for what is coming next. So if you or someone you know has an immigration case, this is the video to watch, especially if you are trying to come to the US. Now that Donald Trump has been elected for a second term, is it safe to stay a green card holder, or do you need to become a citizen in order to protect your rights? Historically, about 1/3 of all green card holders never become a US citizen. But with Trump coming to office and also threatening mass deportations, all of this can change. So in this video, I will break down a list of things that Trump may do in order to target green card holders during his second term and help you decide whether it is safe or not to stay a permanent resident during this administration. Plus, I will share with you all the benefits that you can expect to receive as a US citizen. So be sure to stay tuned. Okay, so what are the risks that green card holders may encounter as a resident in the US underneath the second Trump administration? Nobody can predict the future, but we can make an educated guess about what to expect from his first time in office and from the statements that they have made this election season. For example, one of the biggest things that Trump did to endanger residents was to make the commission of any crime a deportable offense. That included minor offenses such as petty theft or getting a DUI, and it applied to everyone who was not a US citizen, including green card holders. You didn't even need to have a conviction for these crimes. Just simply having a pending charge was enough to get your status taken away and for you to be removed from this country. And it did not matter if your charges were 20 years old or if you have been an upstanding member of society ever since. And as long as you were still a resident and a green card holder, you could get deported. During Trump's first term, the administration also reinterpreted the Immigration and Nationality Act so that they could deport green card holders based on their country of origin. If they believe that your country of origin posed a potentially serious adverse foreign policy consequences, which basically meant that it had a negative relationship with the United States, then your green card could be taken away and you could do nothing about it. If the administration decided to cancel your legal status and deport you, they could do so without a hearing or a trial, and it was perfectly legal. And if you think that the Trump administration wouldn't target green card holders, just look at what they did with the travel ban. When it was first announced, Trump's White House chief of staff publicly confirmed on national television that it did apply to green card holders. It wasn't until months later that they actually updated the travel ban to exclude residents. And even after this ban was updated, green card holders from the affected countries still faced more scrutiny every time they re-entered the United States. That is most likely to resume once Trump gets back in office. Another way that the administration targeted green card holders was by canceling the contract with the company that prints green cards. This happened in June of 2020 and led to a backlog of almost 50,000 lawful permanent residents who could not receive their green cards, even though their immigration status had been approved. Without these cards, they were unable to start new jobs, travel internationally, open bank accounts, or even do other things that required proof of legal status without going through a lot of hassle to get proof of a stamp in their passport. And it wasn't until Biden came to office and hired a new contractor that green card production resumed and returned to its normal levels. If this were to happen at the start of Trump's next administration, then we could continue to see that same delay happen again. We could see record delays for green card renewals. Trump also increased the number of employers required to use E-Verify, an online tool that checks the employment authorization status of employees. And although it was intended to prevent undocumented workers from being able to work, it ended up causing many legal immigrants to lose their jobs due to simple errors, such as an employer entering in their information incorrectly into the system. If Trump were to get his way and make E-Verify mandatory for all employers, it's estimated that around 200,000 legal workers could lose their jobs. due to these kinds of mistakes. And if you think that that is unlikely, consider the fact that Trump's former vice president just sponsored a bill called the Mandatory E-Verify Act last June. It's obviously something that they are still interested in. Another significant change that Trump made during his first administration was expanding the public charge rule, which discouraged many green card holders from even applying for public assistance. Under this rule, if an immigrant used public benefits for 12 months or more, they could later be labeled as a public charge and become ineligible to receive a green card. However, this did not prevent persons who already had a green card from becoming fearful and not applying for benefits that they were eligible for. This included government programs such as food stamps, Medicaid, and housing assistance. If the reason why you applied for the public benefit occurred even before you became a green card holder, you could still potentially be listed as a public charge and lose your residency status. Now, to be clear, all of these changes happened during Trump's first administration, but not all of them were strictly enforced. We did not see green card holders get deported over traffic tickets or because of their country of origin. Most permanent residents who lost their status had other more serious criminal convictions, submitted fraudulent green card applications, or were found to have abandoned their residency. But that said, the Trump administration still gave themselves the power to deport pretty much anyone that they wanted. And it's likely that they may take a similar approach this time around. So now that we know the potential risks underneath the Trump administration, should all green card holders be applying for citizenship? It's difficult to think of a reason not to. Trump has made many immigration threats a centerpiece of his second term. He has declared already that he will carry out the most massive deportation in the history of all of the US. And his administration has had 4 years to get ready for this moment. So they're likely going to bring back every policy that made life difficult for green card holders. And they'll probably introduce new ones as well, which means that now is a good time to start considering naturalizing if you have been putting it off. Not only would it protect you from all the things that we have discussed, but it also comes with some incredible benefits, like protection against deportation. Even if immigration policies spiral out of control, US citizens are protected in a way that green card holders simply are not. And while there has been some talk of denaturalization underneath Trump, it's likely to remain limited to cases involving fraud. Also, as a US citizen, you no longer need to worry about renewing your status. Citizenship is permanent, sparing you from delays or denials, which are likely to become more common underneath Trump. In addition, there are other significant benefits to becoming a citizen, including a U.S. passport that lets you travel to more than 180 countries without a visa, the freedom to live abroad and stay abroad as long as you want without risking the loss of your status, a stress-free return to the U.S. without worrying about being questioned by customs for your overseas visit, the ability to vote in elections and shape the country's future, access to federal benefits such as Social Security, government jobs, and certain scholarships, the ability to sponsor family members for residency much faster than if you were still a green card holder, and the ability to sponsor parents, children, and siblings. So what do you think? Is it time to naturalize, or are there still good reasons to remain a green card holder? Leave me a comment and let me know. Trump has signed an executive order to bring back the travel ban, and this time it could be worse. Not only will it ban legal immigration from countries, but it also gives Trump the power to deport legal immigrants who are already here. That's why it is so important for you to know whether or not this ban affects you and what you can do to stay protected. Your future in the US could depend on this. The original travel ban by Trump was a way to ensure that Muslim persons could not enter the United States. In fact, it was so obviously religiously discriminatory that the first two versions were struck down for violating the First Amendment. Now, Trump is trying to take it even further. This new ban will not just start targeting persons who are from Muslim-majority countries, it will also target persons from those countries who are inside the United States. In his executive order, protecting the United States from foreign terrorists and other national security and public safety threats, Trump says, within 60 days of this order, our national security agencies shall submit a report identifying how many many nationals from banned countries have entered or have been admitted into the United States on or since January 20, 2021. And whenever information is identified that would support their exclusion or removal, the Secretary of Homeland Security shall take immediate steps to exclude or to remove them. So once this ban takes effect, it won't just block new immigrants, it will also force legal immigrants from those countries to be vetted a second time. And if the Trump administration finds any reason to support your removal, then you could also be deported from the United States. But it doesn't stop there. The executive order also says that a person cannot bear hostile attitudes toward American citizens, culture, government, institutions, or founding principles, and should not advocate, aid, or support designated foreign terrorists and other threats to our national security. This means that if you simply protest a cause the Trump administration doesn't like, they could argue that you have a hostile attitude toward the country and use it as an excuse to deny your case or to deport you. One obvious target is going to be foreign students who protest the genocide of Palestinians. This will almost certainly be used to take away their student visas and deport them back to their home countries. The new travel ban won't just block persons from entering the United States, it'll also slow down visa processing and legal immigration for everyone. It tells immigration agencies to vet and screen to the maximum degree possible all immigrants who intend to enter the United States. This means that it will take longer to process almost every single case, regardless of where you are from. So you can expect more paperwork, more requests for evidence, and more interviews. It also means that more persons will get stuck inside of administrative processing when they're outside of the US, and where cases are pulled for extra review, adding months and sometimes years to their total processing time. In the end, this will cause legal immigration to slow to a crawl for everyone. So now that we know what the new travel ban does, who is likely to be the main target? We won't know for sure until Trump announces the final list. By the end of his first term, these were the countries that faced partial or complete bans: Iran, Libya, North Korea, Somalia, Syria, Venezuela, Yemen, Myanmar, Eritrea, Kyrgyzstan, Nigeria, Sudan, and Tanzania. The restrictions were not the same for every country. For example, all immigrants and non-immigrants were banned from Iran with the exception of students and exchange visitors. Somalia, on the other hand, had all immigrant visas banned, but every type of non-immigrant visa was allowed. By the time that Trump issued his fourth travel ban, he admitted that his main focus was blocking immigrant visas since those are harder to take away once someone is already inside the United States. This means that the main persons being targeted were parents of US citizens, adult children of US citizens, spouses and children regardless of age of lawful permanent residents, the diversity visa program, most employment-based visas, and other kinds of immigrant visas. The people who were least likely to be affected by this travel ban were spouses and minor children of US citizens, active duty troops and their families, persons applying for EB-5 investor visas, and anyone whose entry was deemed to be within the national interest. The original travel ban also had exemptions, including for anyone who was legally inside the United States when it was already announced, anyone who already had a valid visa, all green card holders, anyone with advanced parole, and any dual citizens as long as they were not traveling on a passport from a banned country. Note that the previous travel ban did not affect people applying for adjustment to status inside the United States. And since most employment-based green cards do go through this process, employment-based immigration was mostly unaffected by this travel ban. So in reality, the travel ban was more of a family immigrant visa ban and did not restrict travel for those with legal status already inside the United States. Now that we have a good idea of what Trump's travel ban might look like, how can we protect ourselves? One of the safest things that you can do is stay inside the United States until the new ban is officially announced. The first travel ban resulted in chaos at airports across the United States, and even persons with legal status were denied entry by customs. So while that probably won't happen this time, the safe move is still to be inside the US when the travel ban is announced. And if you do get stopped at the airport, you might qualify for a waiver if you can prove that you'll face serious hardship if you're denied entry, that your entry is in the national interest, and that you are not a security threat. To be safe, consider traveling with a detailed cover letter explaining that you meet these 3 criteria, along with documents to back it up. However, this is not a guarantee that you'll be allowed back in with this, but it is always safe to get the help of an attorney to help you create this document. I'll include a link in the description below to list all the documents recommended to be carried by the American Immigration Lawyers Association, AILA, of which I'm a proud member. And if you're a student, it's a good idea to keep proof of school funding along with a certificate of enrollment or transcript with you at all times to prove that you are in a proper F1 status. If you have any questions or need help, the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee has also set up a 24-hour hotline for anyone affected. You can call them at 844-232-9955. And of course, I'll keep you updated as we learn more about Trump's new travel ban and how it will affect you. So make sure that you subscribe to my channel so that you can keep up with me and the latest immigration news. Now that President Trump is president again, is it safe for green card holders to travel abroad? The last time he was in office, Trump tried to ban travel from 15 different countries and made it harder for non-US citizens to enter the United States. Now he's promised to go even further with these travel bans and go even further by declaring a national state of emergency and shut down the US border. In fact, by the time that you're watching this, he may have already made this announcement. So let's talk about what this means for green card holders, whether it's safe to travel, and what may happen during this second Trump administration. Okay, so should green card holders be worried about traveling underneath Trump at this time around? Well, it depends. It is very likely that Trump will put more focus on non-citizens and their travel back into the United States, especially from those countries with a travel ban. You could also be a target if you spend a lot of time in these countries, or if Customs and Border Patrol do not think that you have enough significant ties to the US. That means that when you come back to the US, you may have to go through a secondary inspection, answer more questions to prove that you have not abandoned your residency, show extra paperwork, or wait for longer processing times through the airport. And how long you have been away also matters. In general, if you have been outside the US for less than 6 months, you generally should not have a problem with re-entering the United States. But if you have been away from anywhere between 6 to 12 months outside of the US, Customs may ask you for more proof to make sure that you have not given up your US residency. And if you stay outside for more than 12 months, they may even deny you re-entry and force you to abandon your green card. Usually, you can avoid this problem by applying for a re-entry permit before you depart the US, especially if you know you will be away for more than 1 year. But this may not even guarantee that you'll be allowed back in. Customs and Border Patrol agents have a lot of power underneath this scenario. And if the Trump administration enforces stricter rules, they can still deny you re-entry. In fact, even if you have been outside of the US for less than 12 months, they could refuse you entry into the United States if you do not have enough ties to the United States. For example, if you don't have a job, a bank account, a residential lease, or a home address in the US, it may not matter if your trips are less than 6 months. You may still get flagged, especially underneath this Trump administration. That's why it is a good idea to put off any travel that is not strictly necessary until after Trump has been in office for several months, so we can see what sort of executive orders are issued that could affect your ability to travel in and out of the United States. This may even save you from getting stranded abroad, and it would give you time to prepare before you travel. With Trump as president, you will also want to make sure that you have all of your documentation necessary to prove that you have strong ties to the United States in case you face extra scrutiny. This includes things like US bank account statements, property ownership records, business ownership records, proof of your US mailing address, proof that you have family and community connections here, tax returns filed as a US resident, a valid US driver's license, evidence that your trip is only temporary, evidence that you maintain a residence and home here, and of course, a re-entry permit if you do anticipate that your trip will take longer than 12 months. These are what Customs may be looking for when they decide whether or not to admit or deny you entry. And it can make all the difference between you being stuck outside of the US or not. Note that if you are denied entry into the United States, do not let the customs agent bully you or coerce you into signing abandonment of your residency. There are common tactics that they have to try to pressure and threaten people into signing a Form I-407, which officially causes you to give up your permanent residency. But there is no punishment to you for not signing it. Instead, they would be required to give you a notice to appear, which would then place you in removal proceedings, but that would at least give you an opportunity to challenge whether or not you have abandoned your residency in front of an immigration judge rather than under duress at the airport. So if you find yourself being pressured to sign something and give up your rights, don't fall for their tricks. And if you have anything problematic in your immigration history, such as a criminal record, then it is a good time to speak with an immigration lawyer before you depart the US to understand what consequences you may have, especially now that Trump is president again. There's been a lot of talk about whether or not Trump is going to be targeting lawful permanent residents, and it looks like we finally have our answer about whether or not he will be targeting green card holders. In just the past few weeks, we have seen multiple cases of lawful permanent residents being detained, questioned, deported, and even violently interrogated by immigration officers. And it looks like Trump is about to try to pass laws that will give him even more power to deport even more people with legal status. So what does this mean for green card holders? And should you be worried? I'm going to cover each of these recent stories and explain the likelihood of you being targeted. And as a bonus, I will even share additional steps on what you can do to protect yourself, whether you're traveling here or outside the US. The first story comes from a viral TikTok video that has millions of views. A woman posted a warning about her 23-year-old niece, a nursing student and lawful permanent resident, who was denied entry back into the United States after attending her mother's funeral. Her niece had done everything by the books. She had had her green card for 6 months, she had done the process with an attorney, and she was only gone for 3 weeks. But when she landed at LAX, customs officials took her green card, cut off a corner, and put her in a holding room. There was no translator, no legal representation, and no appeal process. Then, without warning, she and several others were told that they would not be allowed back into the United States. ICE then collected $200 from each person and put them back on a plane. No explanation, no hearing, just deported. Someone in the same holding room was told that if you had a green card for less than 2 years and then left the US, you might not be allowed back into the United States. Now, this is not an official law, but if CBP officers are enforcing it like a rule, it means that international travel for green card holders could become a serious risk, even if every immigration guideline is closely followed. And it's not just happening at LAX. This next case happened at a different airport, and it sounds like it was even a worse experience. Fabian Schmidt, a German national and a longtime US green card holder, was returning home from a trip from Luxembourg. But when he landed at Logan Airport in Boston, customs officers flagged his recently renewed green card, and that's when things took a terrifying turn. According to news reports, he was detained, violently interrogated for hours, and stripped naked before being forced into a cold shower by 2 immigration officials. After that, they denied him food and water, keeping him under bright lights to prevent him from sleeping and pressuring him to give up his green card. And despite having no active criminal cases against him, Schmidt is now being held in an ICE detention facility in Rhode Island, where his family is desperately fighting to save him. Now, the next case should make it clear that Trump is detaining persons no matter whether or not they have traveled or not, because Mahmoud Khalil was not detained at the border or stopped at an airport. He was arrested at his own home. Mahmoud Khalil is a Palestinian activist and Columbia graduate student who has been a permanent lawful resident for several years. He has no criminal record and was on track to start his new job in order to support his U.S. citizen wife, who is now pregnant at 8 months. But none of this mattered. On March 8th, ICE agents showed up at his Manhattan apartment and arrested him in front of his wife after they were returning from an iftar gathering. At first, they claimed that his student visa had been revoked. But when it became clear that he was actually a green card holder and he didn't even have a student visa, visa, then the story changed. Now, the Trump administration is trying to strip him of his green card and deport him without even charging him of any crime. And the reason why? They are claiming that he engaged in activities involved with Hamas, even though there is zero evidence that he has any ties to this organization. All he did was participate in pro-Palestinian protests at Columbia University. And that is likely the reason why they want him gone. One of Trump's own executive orders states that any immigrants who bear hostile attitudes towards American culture and institutions or have pro-jihadist views should be deported immediately. But bearing hostile attitudes towards American culture or institutions can literally mean anything that they want it to mean. And even though Khalil did not have pro-jihadist views, but was instead advocating for the basic human rights of Palestinian persons, they are still labeling him as a terrorist. So this is a sign that the Trump administration is going to weaponize immigration law to remove people it simply does not want in this country. And in Mahmoud's case, they are using it to arrest him for his political views, effectively turning him into a political prisoner, which is very unconstitutional, as well as having a chilling effect on free speech. So it increasingly looks like Trump is in fact going after green card holders, and we need to talk about why. The stories that we have covered aren't just isolated incidents. They're happening at the same time that Trump is preparing a new travel ban. This ban is set to go into effect soon, and it will block travel and immigration from dozens of countries. Some will be completely banned, while others will face severe restrictions. And two of the cases that we have discussed, both Mahmoud Khalil and the Laotian green card holder that was discussed in the TikTok video, both involve green card holders from Trump's proposed travel ban list. Note that green card holders were previously protected and exempt from the travel ban, so your country of origin should not be grounds to have your green card taken away. But anything is possible in this Trump administration. Also, this is not the first time that this has happened. In 2017, Trump signed the first ban targeting 13 countries, most of which were Muslim-majority nations. And during this time, customs regularly pressured green card holders from those countries to sign the Form I-407, which basically abandons your residency. However, there were never any reports of lawful permanent residents having their green cards be taken away. That's new. So if we start hearing more stories of similar things happening, then as a green card holder, you might want to think twice about traveling internationally, especially if you are from one of the banned countries. I'll put a full list of the countries that Trump is proposing to ban on the screen so you can check to see if your country is amongst them. As of the time of this recording, it has not yet been announced, but initial reports show that 43 of these countries could be banned to one degree or another. Now, what about the German green card holder? Unlike the two other cases, he's not from a banned country, so why was he detained? The most likely reason are his past legal issues. He had a dismissed misdemeanor marijuana charge and a DUI from years ago. He also missed a court hearing because a notice was not forwarded to his new address. Even though none of these are major crimes, immigration law allows the government to take away your green card if they can justify it legally. So it's important that you understand what can put your legal status at risk and how to avoid it. I have a separate video outlining the top 10 ways the government can take away your green card status, and I'll include a link to that video here. So what does it mean for you? Do you need to be worried about your legal status? Right now, we are not seeing a widespread targeting of green card holders. Most of these cases appear to involve specific factors, either being from a banned country, having a past legal criminal issue, or being the target of an executive order by the Trump administration. But this could change. As new laws take effect, it's possible that more green card holders will be affected. That's why it is so important to understand your rights and take legal steps to protect your legal status both inside the US and outside the US when traveling. So now that we know that the Trump administration is targeting green card holders, what can you do to protect yourself? Let's start with international travel. If you're a green card holder, traveling abroad is unfortunately now riskier than ever. Even though you may be a lawful permanent resident, that does not mean that your rights are absolute. And customs officials have a lot of power to question you and detain you upon your return. That is why you should always carry proof of strong ties to the US, including pay stubs, tax returns, lease agreements, mortgage statements, and bank account records. And if you don't have these, you're more likely to get flagged for abandoning your green card status, especially if you have traveled outside for more than 6 months. Limit long trips abroad. If you're gone for more than 6 months, you will get extra scrutiny. If you're gone for more than 12 months, you may be denied re-entry altogether unless you have a re-entry permit. And if you've had your green card for less than 2 years, consider postponing your travel plans until we know for sure whether or not customs might target you. Avoid countries on the proposed travel ban list. If you are from one of those banned countries, or if you've traveled there recently, you could get stopped at the airport. Immigration officials have already been detaining and deporting green card holders from these countries, so be extra cautious. Now might not be the time to travel internationally. Do not sign the Form I-407. If an immigration officer tries to pressure you into signing anything, do not sign anything without the presence of an attorney. They cannot force you to sign it. And for now, only an immigration judge can legally take away your green card if there is an issue. So insist on seeing a judge and do not let these immigration agents bully you into submission. And get legal advice before you travel, especially if you have any issues. If you have any criminal history, I 100% recommend that you do not travel, even if these things were dismissed. We just do not know what will happen. Even minor offenses from many years ago could trigger an issue. However, if you are staying inside the United States, Trump's immigration crackdown could still affect you. So here are some ways to protect yourself here at home. First, keep your green card and other immigration documents up to date. If your green card is expiring soon, make sure to renew it ASAP. Also, make sure your passport and work permits are valid. This way, you have documentation in case you are questioned. Next, report any address changes to USCIS. If you move, you must update your address with the USCIS within 10 days. Plus, missing any important letters could put your status at risk. Avoid any contact with the criminal justice system. Even low-level offenses like DUIs or minor drug charges could still be weaponized by the Trump administration and cause you to be placed into proceedings. If you get arrested for any reason, talk to an immigration lawyer immediately. Be careful about public statements and the use of your social media. The Trump administration is monitoring immigrants' social media accounts, looking for anything that they can use to justify taking away your residency. If you've ever supported protests or made any public statements about Palestine, immigration, or other controversial topics, be aware that these could be used against you. Know your rights if ICE stops you. You do not have to answer their questions about your immigration status. You have the right to stay silent and ask to speak to your attorney. Do not sign anything without the presence of an attorney and without the proper legal advice. And finally, if you're worried about your status, now is the time to act. Becoming a citizen is the best way to protect your rights in a permanent manner, but you must make sure that you're eligible, otherwise that could create a problem as well. If you're not eligible yet, stay informed and take steps to protect yourself, because as we have seen, even green card holders may be targeted. My name is Moumita Rahman, and I have been practicing immigration law for the past 15 years. We have helped thousands of immigrants get their legal status fixed across the entire country, and even during the last Trump administration. And we would love to do the same for you. If you would like my help on your case, give our office a call to schedule a case evaluation at 212-248-7907. We are based in New York, and we serve clients in all 50 states. With Trump returning to office for a second term, what new policies and procedures can we expect that will make it even harder for legal immigration inside the United States? During his first term, changes at USCIS increased denials by 37% and slowed case processing by an average of 46%. So today, we are going to take a look at these policies because there is a chance that every single one of them could make a comeback. Okay, so the first thing that you need to understand about Trump's immigration policies is that they are not designed to make it easier for you to immigrate to the US. In his mind, immigrants are actually harming the country. So his goal is actually to make it more difficult to come here. And if you do manage to make it into this country, his goal is to make sure that you fit his vision of America. So he is going to create policies that are going to slow things down and to inspect you more carefully along the way. For example, one of the policies that he put in place during his first term was something called continuous immigration vetting, a system designed to track immigrants from the day that they apply for immigration benefits until the day that they become U.S. citizens. This program used a computer system to continuously run information through security databases at every stage of your immigration process. And if the system flagged you as a potential security risk, your case would be pulled for review by an immigration officer. DHS has not exactly shared shared what the system looked for, but they did share that something as simple as your nationality could trigger a flag. And by the end of Trump's first term, the system had flagged 124,000 immigration cases for review, significantly slowing down the entire agency. Another thing that USCIS did underneath Trump was to end the deference policy. This was a policy that told USCIS officers not to go back and review case details if the previous case had already been approved. For example, if somebody in the US was already here on an H-1B visa and they have successfully renewed the visa twice before, then it should be very easy for them to renew it a third time. But the Trump administration disagreed. They put an end to this deference policy and required USCIS officers to review every single renewal and extension as though it were a brand new case. As a result, the number of RFEs and denials increased. And this one change in policy was one of the biggest reasons for delays underneath the Trump administration in the first term. Another policy that slowed down decisions was requiring interviews for every case. At first, this requirement for in-person interviews only applied to employment-based cases, as well as refugee and asylum applications. But they had plans to expand in-person interviews to even more case types underneath Trump's first term. And as a result of all of these interviews, USCIS officers had less time to do other tasks, which meant longer processing times overall for everybody. Okay, the policies that we discussed were not just slowing down the process, but the next ones went a step further and put more people into removal proceedings. In 2018, the Trump administration actually told officers to go ahead and just deny cases for missing simple documents. This meant that no requests for evidence were sent out or even notices of intent to deny, just simple denials. So if your application was not flawless, you did not get a chance to fix it. You had to start over and file again. But it did not stop there. The Trump administration also introduced an automatic NTA policy, which required USCIS officers to issue a notice to appear whenever an immigration application was denied. This meant that if you made some sort of mistake on your Form I-485 and it got denied as a result, it could cause you to end up in removal proceedings. Even if you had no criminal record, paid all of your taxes on time, and had a family here in the US, a simple error in your application could lead to deportation proceedings. The next policy was designed to prevent people from coming into the US, and that was Trump's public charge rule. The public charge rule originally said that you could not get legal status in this country if you received more than half of your income from cash assistance programs. But Trump expanded this rule to include more government programs such as food stamps, Medicaid, and housing assistance. And instead of requiring just half of your income be from cash assistance, the new rule said that you were inadmissible if there was even a chance that you might need to receive these benefits. That meant that USCIS would look into the details of your personal life and finances, and even prospective ability to earn income to decide if you were at risk of becoming a public charge. For example, if your family income was below $31,000 for a family of 4, that could prevent you from getting legal status, even if you never even used government benefits before. Some other things that could get you labeled as being a public charge included if you had any sort of health problems, being older than the working age, not having private health care, being unemployed, not being able to speak English well, or having a lower education level. The Trump administration needed a way to get all this information, so they created a form called the Form I-944 called the Declaration of Self-Sufficiency. This was an 18-page form that asked for all kinds of sensitive personal information, including a credit report. It also requested information on your health history, your financial status, your personal assets, details on all of your family members, your education history, and your employment history, among other things. It basically provided the Trump administration with anything that they could use in order to deny your application based upon the public charge rule, even if you were not actually at risk of becoming a public charge. Many people started calling this a wealth test because your financial situation often decided whether or not you would be allowed into the country or granted legal status. Now, assuming that you made it through continuous vetting, you didn't have your case denied over a tiny mistake, you passed the in-person interview, and you didn't get labeled as a public charge, you could still have your case sabotaged by anyone who didn't like you. That's because the Trump administration created a USCIS tip form that allowed anyone to report anyone for fraud. This could include an angry ex, a disgruntled boss, or disgruntled disgruntled employee, or even simply someone who did not like immigrants. And the person providing this information did not even have to provide their name or contact information. They could simply report you anonymously. And to make matters worse, the form did not define what fraud actually meant, making it easy for people to justify their actions and feel like they were doing the right thing by reporting you. Now, I want to remind everyone that this is information based upon what Trump did during his first term and from public statements made by his administration. We don't know exactly what he will do again until he takes office. But that said, Trump has made immigration the focus of his second term and has already announced some outrageous things, like using the military for mass deportations, ending birthright citizenship, and deporting U.S. citizens along with their family members. So I would not be surprised if his immigration policies are just as extreme the second time around. Now that Trump has been elected into a second term, what are the chances that your citizenship will be taken away? This is a frequent question that I have been getting from panicked clients and viewers alike. After the election, a tweet from former Trump policy advisor Stephen Miller went viral, saying that they plan to turbocharge their denaturalization program in 2025. This has made a lot of immigrants understandably very nervous, especially if they already have their citizenship. So in this video, I am going to explain whether or not you should be worried that you may lose your citizenship underneath this plan. And as a bonus at the end of this video, I'll go over and recap the various reasons for denaturalizations under the last Trump presidency. So stay tuned. Okay, so what is this denaturalization program that everybody is so worried about? During the Obama administration, the Department of Homeland Security started a program called Operation Janus that was designed to utilize old fingerprints and biometric data from immigration files and match them against existing criminal records. The goal was to find immigrants who had been previously ordered deported, but were then able to somehow apply for citizenship because they had been able to change their names. Once President Obama left office and Trump took over, this denaturalization program was expanded further to include people with old removal orders that they never appeared for, people with discrepancies in their applications, and people with allegations of crimes that they had not yet been charged with at the time of naturalization. As a result of this program, the number of denaturalization cases went from 95 in 2017 to 1,600 in 2008. And in its 2019 budget request, ICE asked for $200 million to review the files of 700,000 U.S. citizens, implying that they intended to refer even more cases in the future. Then in February 2020, Trump's Justice Department announced the creation of a new denaturalization section that would investigate and litigate the denaturalization of terrorists, war criminals, sex offenders, and other fraudsters. In the announcement, they gave some examples of cases where they had already successfully pursued denaturalization, including an individual who recruited for Al-Qaeda, someone guilty of war crimes in Bosnia, a convicted pedophile, and a group of 4 individuals who claimed to be a family in order to gain admission to the U.S. through the diversity visa program. All other cases involved crime or fraud of some sort. One widely publicized case was that of Baljinder Singh. In 1991, this 17-year-old Punjabi male arrived in California with no travel document, seeking asylum. When a translator asked for his name, he told him that his name was Devinder Singh. He was released to friends in New Jersey and then ordered to appear in court in January of 1992. When he did not show up on this day, the court issued a deportation order issued in absentia. Then, less than 1 month later, someone with the same set of fingerprints filed for asylum in the same New Jersey court, but under the name of Baljinder Singh. The court found that the case had enough merit to proceed, and eventually not only was he approved, but he later became a citizen. Then, more than 25 years later, the government was able to match 2 sets of fingerprints underneath Operation Janus and realized that Singh had used a fraudulent identity in order to obtain citizenship. And in January of 2018, the government was officially able to revoke his citizenship. Again, this was a case that involved a high level of serious fraud. So when Stephen Miller says that he is going to turbocharge the denaturalization program in 2025, 2025, the type of cases that they are going to go after will focus more likely than not on this type of fraud. If you don't have anything like this in your past, then you should not have anything to worry about. And you should not be living in anxiety that you will be a target for denaturalization. But if you do have something like this in your past, there might be legal arguments that you might be able to make in order to defend yourself. However, not only will you want to hire a good immigration attorney to help you fight these sorts of charges, but you'll also need to hire a federal litigator as denaturalization cases occur in federal court. So, as I mentioned before, many people have been reaching out to us worried about this denaturalization program. Please understand that denaturalization is a seriously heavy burden for the government to prove, and most cases that you might think would fall underneath this category would not actually have grounds to stand. However, because I know that many of you will still be understandably very worried, let's take a look at some of those cases that I promised you we would talk about where the Trump administration did successfully prosecute and denaturalize folks. The Open Society Justice Initiative got files from courthouses around the country and reviewed 168 denaturalization cases that were filed between January 1st, 2017 and December 31st, 2018. Out of these cases, 37.5 were Operation Janus cases, meaning that 37.5 cases resulted just from matching fingerprint sets. 13.1% were due to prior criminal activity. 11.9% were due to fraudulent documents. 9.5% were due to sex and child-related claims. 7.7% were due to marriage fraud. 6.6% were due to terrorism-related activity. 5.4% were due to war activities, 4.8% were due to immigration issues, and 3.5% were unclear. While these were not all of the cases that were filed underneath the Trump administration, it is certainly a good representation of them. As mentioned, during this time, only about 1,600 cases were filed out of the millions of people who are naturalized. So you should have a pretty good sense and hopefully feel a little bit easier about what may be to come. You should not be worried that you would lose your citizenship over something as simple as an undisclosed traffic ticket, which is not a criminal activity. You should also not be worried about simple mistakes causing your denaturalization. It costs the government a lot of money, time, and effort in order to denaturalize someone, and the government will likely not make the effort unless there is actual fraud that they believe exists. The incoming Trump administration is about to make it a lot harder to become a U.S. citizen. In 2019, a survey was conducted with 110 different naturalization providers, and together they reported more than 20 barriers that the Trump administration instituted in order to prevent green card holders from becoming a U.S. citizen. And it is safe to say that we can expect these obstacles to return once he is back in office. So today I'm going to cover the major ways through which the Trump administration is going to try to prevent you from becoming a U.S. citizen. And as an added bonus, I will explain to you how to prepare your citizenship case so that it does not get denied. I also have some good news to end with, so stay tuned. Okay, so what will be some of the biggest barriers to becoming a citizen once Trump is back in office? The first is what we call extreme vetting. This means doing things like increasing the length of citizenship interviews, doing more in-depth screening at every stage of your case, looking deeper into your criminal history or your good moral character history, asking for more information on the N-400, and sending more requests for evidence. USCIS will basically start with the presumption that you have committed fraud and then do everything that they can in order to find it. They might ask you for police records for crimes that you committed more than 5 years ago, or provide even up to a decade of international travel history. They might ask for more detailed lists of every single place that you've lived in, along with police clearance letters for each. And if you don't make much money, they may ask you for more details about your income and taxes. In fact, additional proof of taxes was one of the most common requests for evidence that USCIS gave out during the Trump administration the first time around. That was followed by additional requests for proof of your physical presence, details about your marriage and child support, and criminal history, all of which may have the potential to disqualify you from becoming naturalized. To give you an idea of how ridiculous this extreme vetting became during the Trump administration, it wasn't unheard of for some immigration officers to deny applications for the N-400 for persons who fail to file changes of address within 10 days of moving. Technically, this can disqualify you from becoming a citizen underneath the current rules, and Trump's administration was happy to use it. The next major barrier that you might see is going to be an increase in filing fees. If you think that the current filing fee of $760 is a lot, just wait until it jumps to $1,000 or more. In 2016, the Trump administration increased the filing fee for citizenship by 81%, from $640 to $1,160. Not only that, they tried to make it more difficult to qualify for fee waivers by eliminating the reduced fee option for incomes between 150% and 200% of the federal poverty level. For those who don't know, the high cost of naturalization is one of the biggest reasons why people fail to apply and remain green card holders. And there are currently around 9 million residents who are eligible to apply for naturalization, but have yet to do so. Okay, the next major barrier that you can expect the Trump administration to put in your way is going to be increased processing times. Currently, it takes an average of 5 to 6 months to become a citizen, but during the Trump administration, this doubled to 8 to 9 months. And in some places like Seattle and Miami, the delay was up to 2 years. There were a lot of reasons for this, including Trump's extreme vetting, which made every case take even longer, the requirement to do in-person interviews for other types of cases, which pulled precious time slots away from USCIS officers, and separating family applications rather than processing them together. Naturalization cases also started to take longer because USCIS began to take longer to send out interview notices or send them to the wrong address. And once people showed up for interviews, the time frame for each interview was averaging 45 to 60 minutes, which is double the typical time frame. As a result, by the end of the first Trump administration, there was a backlog of more than 700,000 naturalization cases, which would have kept growing had he not been voted out of office. The next major obstacle that you might expect is a more difficult naturalization exam. In 2020, the Trump administration tried to change the 2008 version to a new naturalization civics test that would have been much more difficult to pass. Currently, the test requires that you answer 6 out of 10 questions correctly. In 2020, they tried to make the change to have persons answer 12 out of 20 questions correctly instead, which would definitely make this test much more difficult for the majority of persons. They also tried to increase the base of questions from 100 to 128, which would require persons to study even more questions. The English test became more difficult as well, with reports of officers asking applicants to define difficult words such as genocide, terrorism, communism, which admittedly, if an applicant could not define correctly, some officers would use this as a reason to deny that the applicant could speak proper English. And officers would sometimes try to stump applicants by framing questions in a negative manner, such as, "Why haven't you voted?" instead of "Have you ever voted?" or "Why have you traveled?" instead of "Have you ever traveled?" And some officers also started to ask questions that were technically outside of the scope of naturalization, such as questions about a person's previous immigration journey as an asylee, or for past divorces, past marriages, payment methods of green cards, money sent to relatives abroad. And of course, answering the wrong way could cause a person's application to get denied. So now that you have a better understanding of what the Trump administration tried to do the last time around to create even more obstacles to naturalization, what can you do in order to protect your case this time around? The biggest piece of advice is to apply now if you qualify. Current processing times are still relatively quick, and should the Trump administration try to implement these obstacles a second time, it will still take time. So get your application in now so that it can get processed with our relatively quick processing times these days. But if you do not yet qualify and you'll be forced to apply later once certain obstacles have been put in place, here are some of the things that you can consider. First, submit a FOIA request to get copies of all of your immigration documents. Use these records to double check every inch of your application before you submit it. Make sure details such as travel history, marriage details, divorce details, criminal records are all consistent with past applications. You also want to make sure you avoid going abroad for longer than 6 months on any one trip out of the US, which could most certainly cause you to get denied. In addition, make sure that you maintain a clean criminal record and make sure you pay all major fees and minor fees. Keep proof of payments in case this is requested. Next, gather any evidence of good moral character, including community service, employment history, and filing your taxes on time. Especially make sure that your taxes are filed correctly and that you do not owe any back taxes. Document everything that you send to USCIS and keep a copy, including copies of all supporting evidence that you provide and your receipts that you receive. Take plenty of time to study English and to study for the civics exam. Make sure you study updated study materials whenever possible. You can go directly to the USCIS website to obtain a copy of the test guide. Constantly monitor your case to see if a request for evidence has been sent out or if an interview notice has been sent out so that you do not lose notices of these. And stay up to date on all the latest policy by monitoring uscis.gov. And one easy way that you can stay on top of the news is to subscribe to my channel. I'll make sure that I cover any changes that happen with the N400 as it occurs. And I'll continue to keep you updated about changes instituted by the Trump administration. And if you have anything in your history, including criminal history, even if it was a long time ago or dismissed, make sure that you consult with an immigration attorney and get their help to file your case, as well as to represent you during the interview. The stakes will simply be too high if you try to do these things yourself. Now, finally, as promised, some good news. Despite all of these things that the Trump administration tried to do to prevent persons from naturalizing, USCIS still had an average approval rating of 89% and 92% during his presidency, which is still the same average that we saw of approvals from before he took office. So please don't let news, policy changes, or scary stories scare you from applying for your rights. If you're smart, organized, well-prepared, and have excellent legal representation, you should be fine. Now that Donald Trump is returning to the presidency, is your immigration status safe? The last time that Trump was in office, he significantly reduced immigration into the United States. And contrary to what many of you may think, he does plan on going further this time. So today, we're going to take a look at what he has planned for each of the immigration programs and find out whether or not your status is in danger. And as a bonus, I will explain at the end of this video how you can protect yourself and all that you have worked hard for in this country. So stay tuned. Let's start with the changes that Trump is likely to make shortly after he enters office in January. Before we dive in, I do want to spread a word of caution that we don't actually know exactly what will happen, and we won't know anything until the administration starts taking actual action. So anything that we talk about today and anything that you have heard so far is merely rumor and is not set in stone. But that said, he has already publicly announced plans that he plans on declaring a state of emergency when he takes office and that he plans on using the military for mass deportations. So I wouldn't pass him trying to do any of these things that he's saying. Okay, so one of the first targets of the Trump administration is going to be asylum, which he tried to effectively ban during his first term. There's a good chance that Trump may use an executive order to prevent asylum offices from granting asylum applications as soon as he enters office, along with some other programs that we will discuss in just a moment. He is also expected to drop the annual cap of refugees from 100,000 refugees per year back down to 15,000 per year like he did during his first term, or even suspend them altogether. In addition, Trump has promised to take away the ability for asylum seekers to be able to obtain work authorization and to start requiring an application fee that will prevent many people from even applying. A lot of news outlets are also reporting that the administration plans on scrapping the CBP One app that migrants use to set up asylum appointments, reinstate the Remain in Mexico policy, and completely shut down the border to asylum seekers. So once he takes office, there's a very strong possibility that asylum will no longer be on the table and will no longer be a reliable pathway to getting status in the United States. I'll include a link for what asylum seekers can do to protect themselves at the end of this video. Another immigration program that Trump is likely to shut down is the TPS program. He tried to do this during his first term, but he was shut down because he did not follow the correct legal procedures in doing so. But he will try again this time, and if he runs into legal obstacles, he can still effectively shut down the program by refusing to issue new TPS designations for the 850,000 people who need them. TPS designations from those from El Salvador end in March, and those for Sudan, Ukraine, and Venezuela end in April. These people could become undocumented overnight and be at particularly high risk of deportation because the government already has their physical address on file. Another program that Trump is likely to shut down immediately is DACA. Again, this is something that he already tried to do during his first term and which he failed in. However, he now has a second shot at doing it during this term. The fate of DACA is currently being held up by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. So when Trump takes office, he can very likely order the Department of Justice to dismiss the appeal and effectively bring DACA to an end. The Trump administration can also create lawsuits challenging the program, then ask the Supreme Court to make the final decision on it. And since now the Supreme Court has a partisan conservative majority, it would likely side with Trump. For those who are waiting on immigrant and non-immigrant visas, there is a strong possibility that Trump will issue a travel ban once he gets in office, completely shutting down immigration from specific countries. These will not only include just the countries from the original Muslim travel ban, but also would include any countries that he considers to be a threat, even if they're not Muslim. For those that are not from a country with an outright ban, the ability to get a visa and come to the United States could even be further hindered by travel bans and shutdowns of embassies. Trump's administration is also likely to reinstate the public charge rule, preventing lower-income individuals from being able to obtain residency and immigrate to the country. They have also made it very clear that they want to switch to a merit-based system for immigration and end chain migration, meaning that they want fewer families coming into the United States and only want to accept the most qualified workers. Over time, it's even possible that Trump may want to eliminate immigration in the categories for families, including siblings, parents, and adult children. Making this change would certainly require changes to be passed through Congress, but it could be possible since now the Republicans control both the House and the Senate. Marriage green cards are the one area that Trump does not seem to have an evil plan for, but approvals are still expected to become more difficult in the future. We will likely see an increase in the number of RFEs issued, an increase in fees, and the disappearance of interview waivers. USCIS officers will also be instructed to place more of an emphasis on fraud and less on speed, which means that the processing times for all cases, especially marriage green card cases, will skyrocket due to the increased inspections. Next is the diversity visa program, which Trump tried to limit during his first term in office. At the time, he was stopped by Democrats in Congress, but now that there is a Republican majority in both houses, he may be able to push it through. Two more humanitarian programs that Trump may try to impose restrictions upon are the T visa and the U visa programs. During his first term, he created something called a no blank policy, which instructed USCIS to deny visa applications that had any blanks in them. As a result, more than 12,000 U visa applications were denied that year. The T visa and the U visa are also specifically mentioned in Project 2025, which is essentially Trump's playbook for his first year in office. It has suggested changing the requirements so that a criminal prosecution would have to take place both when you apply and when your case is approved, which can be as long as 1 to 2 years for a T visa and a decade for the U visa. The chances of being involved in an active 10-year criminal prosecution is very unlikely, and it's virtually zero, so that could make it very difficult to get T visas approved. For VAWA, there is the possibility that Trump may try to get Congress to narrow the eligibility requirements in order to apply. During his first term, he did change the definition of domestic violence to only include physical acts that constitute a felony or a misdemeanor. Although this did not apply to the Violence Against Women's Act, he may likely try to get the same definition. If Congress were to agree and actually change the laws of VAWA in order to agree with Trump, then it would make it significantly more difficult for people to fit the definition of being a domestic violence victim. So now that you know how bad it might get underneath the Trump administration, what can you do about it? Well, for one thing, please keep your hope alive because of the fact that the majority of changes mentioned do require changes to be run through Congress and approved by Congress and made into law. I still firmly believe that many of these changes will not go through because of the fact that humanitarian programs are still widely approved of by the public and by Congress. Otherwise, we would not have such laws in the first place. To completely eliminate the definition of domestic violence or to make it virtually impossible for trafficking victims and victims of violence to be able to obtain relief is not something that most people, not even Republican senators, want to be party to. But I'm not too sure if I feel the same way about asylum, because for that, I do believe that there is a widespread negative connotation towards asylum seekers, and any attacks upon the asylum program may in fact go through. And if you are in a particularly vulnerable position, such as being a TPS or DACA holder, here are some things that you should consider. 1, please start looking for other forms of relief that you may be eligible for, such as the ones that I have already mentioned on my channel multiple times, such as the T visa, the U visa, and especially VAWA if you do not have a legal entry, but you are married to a US citizen. If TPS and DACA are terminated, then you will become undocumented. And the government will also have your location on file, so should they decide to enforce removal activities against you, this will be easier for them. If you are an asylum seeker, make sure you renew your work permit or apply for your first work permit if you are eligible. And do this before Trump takes office, in case any applications that are submitted after Inauguration Day are no longer accepted. You'll also want to get any applications that you have filed before the law changes. If you are in a humanitarian program such as VAWA, T visa, or U visa, please rest assured that the president does not have the power to shut these down. These are based on statutes and law, which means that Congress has to be the one to make changes. And before they make any changes, both houses must agree to the changes. Only Congress has the ability to make the changes found in Project 2025. And no matter what immigration program you're in, it is always a good time to talk to an immigration attorney that you trust to find out how to protect yourself and what options you may have if you do not have any legal status right now. Like I said, the Trump administration is going to try to slow down immigration and even eliminate or prevent immigration into the United States and try to narrow protections for those already inside. Even if they do not succeed, they will make things a little more difficult for a period of time. So it's the right time to get the help of a good lawyer so that you are not blindsided by anything that happens. My name is Moumita Rahman, and I have been practicing immigration law for the past 14 years. My team and I were here during the first Trump administration, and we did not let that stop us from fighting for our clients. If you would like my help on your case, please call to schedule a case evaluation at 212-248-7907. We are based in New York, but we serve clients all over the US. Your journey is our fight, and we are with you every step of the way. All right, well, you guys like a little havoc? Guess what I have for you guys today? We're going to go over the top 3 executive orders signed by President Trump on the very first day of his second term of his presidency. These are the top 3 executive orders, in my belief, that will affect you, my viewers, the most. So we're going to go over them one by one, including the most important one where I know the majority of you will have questions and a lot more anxieties and fear, and that is the executive order seeking to end birthright citizenship. So does that executive order mean that person's citizenships will be taken away just because their parent was not a citizen of the US? Well, stay tuned until the very end because we will discuss that and more. The very first executive order that I wanted to go over with you would be this, which is protecting the United States from foreign terrorists and other national security and public threats. While on its face, this sounds like this should be good, there are some very concerning things in here that I wanted to share. First of all, the purpose of this executive order as written is that it is the policy of the United States to protect its citizens from aliens who intend to commit terrorist attacks, threaten our national security, espouse hateful ideology, or otherwise exploit the immigration laws for malevolent purposes. The United States must ensure that admitted aliens and aliens otherwise already present in the United States do not bear hostile attitudes towards its citizens, culture, government, institutions, or founding principles, and do not advocate for, aid, or support support designated foreign terrorist groups and other threats to our national security. Then this executive order goes on to say that the Attorney General, the Secretary of Homeland Security, and the Director of National Intelligence shall promptly identify all resources that may be used to ensure that all aliens seeking admission to the United States or who are already in the United States are vetted and screened to the maximum degree possible. It goes on to say that extreme vetting and screening shall return to the standards that were set forth in January of 2021 and shall be used for any alien seeking a visa or immigration benefit of any kind. Moreover, this executive order goes on to say that these agencies within 60 days of this order shall identify countries throughout the world for which vetting and screening information is so deficient as to warrant a partial or full suspension on the admission of nationals from those countries pursuant to Section 212F of the INA, and identify how many nationals from those countries have entered or have been admitted to the United States on or since January 20, 2021, and wherever information is identified that would support the exclusion or removal of any alien described in subsection 2B, which I just stated above, the Secretary of Homeland Security shall take immediate steps to exclude or remove that alien unless they determine that doing so would inhibit a significant pending investigation or national security or public safety. So let's break down these first few sections that I just read out loud to you right now. What I can tell you right now is they are basically deeming that somebody can be a national security threat if they espouse hateful ideology or somehow bear a hostile attitude towards citizens, culture, government, or founding principles of this country. I can't even tell you how crazy this is, because what this executive order is seeking to do is to weaponize freedom of thought, weaponize regular political opinions that may not even have any violence involved, and seek to use them in an effort to either exclude someone from the United States or actually actively remove persons in the United States. And this is exactly about the sort of extreme vetting that is going to extremely vet your ideology, your beliefs, and actually, guys, you heard it right here, travel ban within 60 days is what this is mandating. Coming up with a list of countries where they believe that vetting has been insufficient already is just code for another Muslim travel ban or travel ban from countries that happen to be brown, or perhaps even from countries that have publicly criticized President Trump, because right here, the United States must ensure that admitted aliens do not bear hostile attitudes towards its citizens. So this is executive order number 1 that I am going over with you right now. And what does it mean? Well, I think one thing that I can definitely say is be careful if you are protesting. If you are a non-citizen, you have every right to protest. You have every right to express your speech and practice your religion and express your political opinions. But as a non-citizen, you must be careful, because underneath this executive order, we do not know yet exactly how aggressive they will get in trying to enforce this and how broadly they will apply this concept of being hostile to the culture or ideology of the United States. So with that being said, let's move on to executive order number 2, securing our borders. Now, on its face, a lot of people think that this is just about building the wall and that this is just about restricting entry into the United States of persons who are engaged in illegal immigration across the border. But this is not all that this mandates. This executive order is actually about mass deportation. President Trump starts off by explaining that this executive order is about drugs. Deadly narcotics and other illicit materials have flowed across the border, with agents and officers spend their limited resources processing illegal aliens for capture and release into the United States. These catch and release policies undermine the rule of law and our sovereignty, create substantial risks to public safety and security, and divert critical resources away from stopping the entry of contraband and fugitives into the United States. One of my most important obligations is to protect the American people from the disastrous effects of unlawful mass migration and resettlement. My administration will marshal all available resources and authorities to stop this unprecedented flood of legal aliens into the United States. States. It is the policy of the United States to take all appropriate action to secure the borders of our nation through the following means: establishing a physical wall and other barriers monitored and supported by adequate personnel and technology, deterring and preventing the entry of illegal aliens into the United States, detaining to the maximum extent authorized by law aliens apprehended on suspicion of violation of federal or state law until such time as they are removed from the United States, removing promptly all aliens who enter or remain in violation of federal law, pursuing criminal charges against illegal aliens who violate the immigration laws and against those who facilitate their unlawful presence in the United States, cooperating fully with state and local law enforcement officials in enacting federal-state partnerships to enforce federal immigration priorities, and obtaining complete operational control of the borders of the United States. So that was a mouthful. What does it all mean? Well, this is not just about securing the border. It is about actually actively seeking to remove anyone who is suspected of violating federal or state law until such time as they are removed by the United States. This is about mass deportation. And the crazy thing about this executive order is you do not have to be found in violation of immigration law, but rather if you are simply suspected of violating any federal or state law, you may be held, detained, and then deported. So let's go on to the very last executive order that I know that everybody is talking about, and that is protecting the meaning and value of American citizenship. This executive order starts out by saying that the 14th Amendment states all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. That provision rightly repudiated the Supreme Court of the United States' shameful decision in Dred Scott v. Sanford, which misinterpreted the Constitution as permanently excluding persons of African descent from U.S. citizenship solely based on their race. But the 14th Amendment has never been interpreted to extend citizenship universally to everyone born in the U.S., even though it literally says that. The 14th Amendment has always excluded from birthright citizenship persons who were born in the United States but not subject to the jurisdiction thereof, even though anyone on U.S. soil is subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. Consistent with this understanding, the Congress has further specified through legislation that a person born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof is a national and citizen of the United States at birth. Amongst the categories of individuals born in the United States and not subject to the jurisdiction thereof, the privilege of U.S. citizenship does not automatically extend to persons born in the U.S. when that person's mother was unlawfully present in the United States and the father was not a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident at the time of said person's birth, or when that person's mother's presence in the United States at the time of said person's birth was lawful but temporary, such as, but not limited to, visiting the U.S. underneath the auspices of the Visa Waiver Program or visiting on a student, work, or tourist visa, and the father was not a U.S. citizen or permanent resident at the time of said person's birth. And then it goes on to further clarify that persons born underneath these circumstances will not have their birth certificates, even if issued by state, local, or other governments or authorities purporting to recognize U.S. citizenship, accepted. So what does this executive order mean? Does it mean that anyone here who was born to parents who were not citizens of the U.S. will have their citizenship taken away? Or if you have kids that were already born here and you are undocumented, that their citizenship will be taken away? It does not say that. What it does say is that any person who was born 30 days from the signing of this executive order to a mother who is undocumented or here temporarily on a non-immigrant visa will not be allowed citizenship of this country unless the father is a citizen or a green card holder. First of all, on its very face, this violates equal protection because it denies citizenship on the basis of parentage. And not only that, based upon the gender of the parent and whether or not they hold citizenship or green card status. But the thing that I find the funniest about this is the fact that the 14th Amendment literally says any person who is born here is subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. That means any person born here is subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. If the U.S. does not have jurisdiction over these people, then how could the U.S. government enforce laws against these people? How could the U.S. government get these people to pay taxes and be subject to the norms and standards of this country? It simply does not make sense. The biggest concern is the fact that this will likely go to the Supreme Court. As of the signing of this executive order, the very next day, 22 states did sue against the enforcement of this executive order. And as with DACA, America, as with other cases that have gone to court, it is likely to go up to the Supreme Court. And due to the current makeup of the judicial bench, who knows what will happen. But for those of you worried about what is to come, what I can say is that if you are already here, if you were born here, if your kids have already been born and they're here, they have nothing to worry about and you have nothing to worry about. But I do foresee a bunch of havoc playing out and a lot of confusion over how this law is applied, because most states will still continue to issue birth certificates, and these birth certificates must say that the person was born inside the United States. And the way that the current law is set, the way that the Constitution is written and amended, definitely says that if you are born in the United States, you are a citizen and national of the United States. So we are likely to see more executive orders be signed over the next coming months. But for now, you have heard about the most important ones. I will do my best to keep you abreast and informed of the latest updates and changes, and there will be a lot. My name is Moumita Rahman. Make sure you subscribe to my channel to stay up to date on the latest developments. I have been practicing immigration law for the past 15 years, and I have seen a lot through the last Trump administration, and it is my honor to bring you the news as much as I can. If your immigration pathway is at risk, or you're undocumented and want to get legal status, be sure to watch my other video, The Best Way to Get a Green Card Without Marriage. In it, I explain why most green card options are not actually options for the majority of immigrants, and reveal the #1 way to get a green card without marrying a US citizen or green card holder. I'll include a link to that video here. Click to watch now, and I'll see you there.